The baby in my arms had his eyes. But his mother, my son's wife, stood up during brunch, clinked her glass, and said, "We all know that baby isn't his." Laughter circled the table like wildfire. Even my son didn't defend me. I didn't cry. I kissed my grandson's forehead and whispered, "You'll know the truth soon." Across the room, the doctor who delivered him had just walked in, file in hand. They say silence speaks volumes, but mine had grown so heavy over the years it threatened to split my bones. I sat at the very edge of the celebration, behind a tall floral centerpiece no one thought to move. I could barely see the cake. My name card was missing from the table, replaced by one that said, "Extra guest." My daughter-in-law Marlene had smiled sweetly and said, "We didn't think you'd mind." I didn't answer. I never do. Not when the insult is dressed in a compliment. Not when the cut is served with dessert. The hall was full of chatter, clinking glasses, cameras flashing. It was supposed to be a family brunch to honor my son's latest promotion. He was now vice president at the very firm I helped him intern at years ago. Back then, I packed his lunch in my own Tupperware because he didn't want to look like the poor kid. Now, I was the poor woman in the corner, holding the child everyone pretended didn't exist. He squirmed slightly, the baby. His cheeks were full, warm, soft with sleep. My son's dimpled chin. My late husband's almond eyes. And yet, all anyone saw was a scandal. A child born out of what they insisted must be shame. Marlene had convinced everyone, one by one, that the baby came from a mistake. "It's not his," she'd say with a tragic smile, "but we're making it work." As if kindness was a leash and she the martyr for keeping it slack. When she made the toast, no one flinched. Not even him. My son looked into his mimosa like it held answers, like it would shield him from choosing sides. He didn't meet my gaze. That hurt more than the words. It always does. The silence of your own child when a stranger slaps you in public and he turns away. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Another guest, a partner at the firm, leaned over and said, "Bit of a joke, eh? These family things, always messy." I smiled politely and tightened the blanket around the baby. The embroidered corner peeked out, the one with his grandfather's name. The man no one in this room spoke of anymore, as if grief could be tidied away like a coat after winter. The baby stirred. I bounced him gently on my knee. No one offered to hold him. No one asked his name. Marlene made sure of that. She once called him the reminder, and told me I should put the reminder to sleep somewhere else. She said it in front of my son. He just rubbed his temples and said he was too tired for drama. But I didn't cause drama. I just showed up. With the child that bore their name. With the truth none of them wanted in the family album. The door creaked. Low, slow. Like a signal. I looked up and saw her. The doctor. Still in her navy scrubs, her hair tied back in that no-nonsense bun. In one hand, she held a file. In the other, a folded coat. She looked around, searching, until her eyes landed on me. Then the file. Then the baby. She walked forward slowly, as if giving the room time to feel her presence. Marlene noticed her first. Her posture stiffened. "What is she doing here?" she hissed to no one in particular. But I heard it. My son looked up now. He looked from the doctor to me, then back to the baby. For a flicker of a second, I saw it. Recognition. Or was it doubt unraveling? The doctor hadn't spoken yet. She merely stood, now at the corner of the table, holding the file like it was a simple delivery. But everyone could sense the weight in it. Something about her calm unnerved them. The air turned thick, soured by the scent of exposed secrets. I stood slowly. Not dramatically. Just enough to shift the balance of the room. The baby let out a soft sigh in his sleep, unaware of the war being waged around his name. Marlene's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "You don't have to do this here. This is a private event." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Good thing I was invited." She looked at me, then added, "By the person who signed the authorization form." A hush fell over the room. That sentence. Authorization form. The older cousin who was filming the brunch lowered his phone. A server paused mid-step. Even the background music, some light jazz, suddenly felt out of place, like a laugh at a funeral. Marlene tried to recover. This isn't the time for. I interrupted her, gently. If now's not the time to tell the truth, then when? Her face twisted. You just want attention. No, I said. I just want him to know who his father is. The doctor stepped closer. She placed the file gently on the table, next to the untouched dessert. Then she looked at my son, eyes steady. You asked for certainty. It's in there. My son looked at the folder like it might explode. He didn't touch it. He looked at his wife, then at me, then back at the baby. There was something breaking in him. I could see it. Years of rehearsed doubt, of repeating someone else's narrative, of letting love get muffled by convenience. Marlene stepped forward to grab the file, but the doctor's hand landed on it first. Not you, she said simply. You didn't sign anything. I think that's when it started to unravel for her. When she realized the game wasn't hers anymore. The certainty she'd sculpted out of shame and accusation began to collapse, grain by grain. Then my son did something no one expected. He stood. And that's when the baby woke up, and called someone's name. Not mine. Not hers. And not his. Not yet. He used to grip my fingers like they were lifelines. Tiny, sticky hands tugging at my sleeve as we crossed the street, as if the world might swallow him if I ever let go. I never did. I held tighter, even when he pulled away first. That's what motherhood feels like. A series of silent releases. Letting go before they realize they're leaving. I raised my son alone after my husband died. No one helped, not even his side of the family. They said I was young enough to remarry, as if that would replace a man who made tea before work and whispered poetry in the dark. Instead, I worked. Nights. Weekends. Cold hands washing dishes in other people's homes while my baby slept on the neighbor's couch. I missed his first words. I didn't miss his first heartbreak. I was always there, somehow invisible and constant, like the walls that hold up the ceiling. He grew fast. He was always hungry. Milk, books, attention. I gave him all of it. I sold my bangles to pay his first school fee. I still remember the shame I felt watching the jeweler weigh pieces of my wedding memories on a digital scale. But the look on my son's face when he got his acceptance letter made it worth every gram. He promised he'd make me proud. He did. And then he forgot. When he started his internship at the firm, I'd wake at 5 to iron his shirts and pack his lunch. One time, I slipped a note into his sandwich wrap. Just something small. Don't forget who's always rooting for you. That evening, he didn't come home. When he finally did, his ears were red. Don't do that again, he said. It's embarrassing. I never did. I switched from notes to prayers. Then came Marlene. Polished. Sharp. The kind of woman who could cut you open with a smile and leave you thanking her for the favor. She had a laugh like glass breaking and eyes that scanned a room like a security camera. From the first moment, I knew she'd never like me. She once told a friend, in my presence, "She's sweet, but clearly not our class." I was pouring tea at the time. I nearly dropped the cup. My son started dressing differently, talking differently. He called less, visited less. Then one day, he called to say they were engaged. No warning. No dinner. Just a sentence through the static of a poor signal. I didn't cry. I just asked when the wedding was. He hesitated before replying. It'll be small. It wasn't small. It was massive. I was seated next to the servers. My name was misspelled on the program. They forgot to include my husband's name entirely. When the family photo was taken, the photographer gestured for me to step aside. Just the immediate family, please. I was still standing there, dress ironed by hand, shoes a size too tight, holding the envelope with my small gift, an heirloom bracelet I'd kept hidden for decades. It stayed in my purse. Later that night, I left it on their bed. No note. Just the bracelet in a velvet box. Marlene never thanked me. She never mentioned it again. But I saw it in a photo months later, reworked into a new design. The center emerald removed. Replaced with diamonds. My history gutted and polished to suit her style. The pregnancy was announced in a Facebook post I wasn't tagged in. I found out through a neighbor. I messaged my son to say congratulations. He replied 2 days later with a single emoji. Then silence. I waited outside the hospital the week she was due. I told myself I was just passing by, but I brought a bag with snacks and a blanket. I never got a call. But someone else did. An old nurse I'd tutored when she was struggling through nursing school spotted me through the glass. She came out during her break, carrying a cup of tea. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "Looks just like your husband." That night, I bought a baby blanket. Cream-colored. Embroidered with my late husband's name, in gold thread, near the corner. I folded it like scripture. A gift that said, "He belongs. He comes from love." When I tried to deliver it, Marlene wouldn't let me in. "You're overstepping," she snapped. "This isn't your child." I left the blanket on their porch. The next day it was gone. 2 weeks later, a delivery driver handed it back to me in a different box. No note. Just the scent of her perfume lingering faintly in the fabric. I should have broken then. I didn't. I just put it back in my drawer, washed it gently, and waited. I knew the truth sat quietly in that thread. You can erase a name from a program. You can silence a voice in a room. But you can't bleach blood from bone. Sometimes, the baby would be dropped off for a few hours, especially when Marlene had events to attend. I was never told directly. A driver would knock. Mrs. said to watch him until 4. No eye contact. No instructions. Just a bag and a baby and the unspoken understanding that I was still useful. That's all I ever was to them. A utility. A placeholder. But he knew me. That child, barely old enough to walk, would lift his arms when he saw me. He'd bury his head in my shoulder and sigh, as if his body already knew where safety lived. He laughed in his sleep sometimes, and I used to wonder if he dreamed of voices that spoke gently, of lullabies in a language his mother never bothered to learn. One day, as I changed him on the couch, he babbled a word. I froze. Then he repeated it. Not, Mama. Not, Dada. It was the name of my husband. A name he'd never been taught. A name that should have been forgotten. That was the moment I knew. And apparently so did someone else. Because a few days later, my phone rang. It was the doctor. Her voice was calm. "You should stop by the clinic sometime this week. We've updated a few things in the system." I asked if something was wrong. She only said, "No. But something is finally right." And now, at that brunch, with my grandson sleeping in my arms and the doctor standing at the edge of the room holding a folder like it weighed 1,000 bricks, I understood exactly what she meant. But what none of us expected was what would come out of that baby's mouth next. Because the word he said, the name he called, reaching out in the middle of the tension, was not mine. And it wasn't hers either. There's a sound a room makes when truth enters uninvited. It isn't silence, it's the sharp inhale before silence, the scrape of a chair leg, the clink of a fork dropped mid-air. That was the sound the brunch hall made after my grandson spoke. One tiny voice, wobbling and innocent, but it cracked every lie hanging above us like crystal chandeliers. He said a name. My husband's name. Not mine. Not his mother's. A name no toddler could have learned unless it was spoken often, with love. The same name embroidered on the blanket tucked around him. The name Marlene insisted had no place in her house. The name they tried to erase. My son's face broke open. Not into tears, he didn't cry. But I saw it. The flicker, the fracture, the moment a man realizes he's believed a lie for too long and defended the wrong person. He looked at the baby like he was seeing him for the first time. Not a burden. Not a mistake. But a mirror. And in that mirror he saw himself, his father's eyes, his mother's nose, his own dimple. It was all there. It had always been there. Marlene stood frozen, one hand on the back of her chair like she might collapse or run. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned toward the doctor, desperate now. You need to leave. This is harassment. We didn't authorize this. The doctor didn't even flinch. She placed the folder on the table, calmly, and looked at my son. You signed the request form. You gave me the cheek swab yourself. You said you wanted to know. Her tone never rose. It didn't need to. Truth delivered quietly is louder than any scream. The file sat unopened. Everyone stared at it like it might explode. My son reached for it, slowly, fingers trembling, but stopped just short of touching it. I didn't think she'd actually do it, he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. His eyes flicked up to me, then down to the baby. You said he wasn't mine. Marlene's voice turned sharp, high-pitched. Because he isn't. I mean, maybe he isn't. I don't know. Why are we doing this now? This isn't the time or place. I stepped forward, only one step, still holding the baby. He looked up at me, sleepy and confused by the tension, and I kissed his temple. You made it the time and place, I said gently. When you mocked him in front of strangers. When you mocked me. The air felt thick. Even the servers had stopped moving. Somewhere near the kitchen, a phone buzzed unanswered. The camera cousin had started recording again. I could feel it, the hush of anticipation that always comes before a scandal. But I wasn't here to perform. I was here to correct the story. My son finally opened the folder. His fingers fumbled at first, then steadied as he flipped through the pages. His eyes scanned the lines, his brow furrowed. I watched as the weight settled. The truth wasn't just printed in ink. It landed in his chest like a heartbeat returning. He looked up, locking eyes with the doctor. There's no mistake. She shook her head. None. Marlene's chair scraped back loudly. This is manipulation. You're all trying to ruin me. She wants to take everything I built. I interrupted her softly. You built it on sand. And now the tide's here. She turned to my son, reaching for him. You don't actually believe this. She's been poisoning you against me for years. He didn't move. Just stared at her with something worse than anger. Disappointment. The kind that ages you 10 years in 10 seconds. You let me believe I wasn't his father. You let me think I abandoned a child that was mine. His voice cracked. Do you know what that does to a man? She looked at me then. With hatred. With fear. But most of all, with the disbelief of someone who just realized the quiet woman she ignored could end her world with a whisper. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I swear, you'll regret this. I adjusted the baby in my arms, who yawned and nestled into my shoulder. Maybe. But not today. My son stepped forward. He reached out, not to me, but to his son. I handed the baby over, and the child reached for him instinctively, like something ancient and remembered. My son cradled him awkwardly at first, then tighter, surer, like the knowledge of fatherhood was rising in his blood. He knows me, he whispered, amazed. Yes, I said. He always did. There were no cheers. No applause. Just the quiet turning of a tide. A storm had passed, but the damage wasn't over. Marlene picked up her clutch and stormed toward the exit, leaving her empty champagne glass and her crumbling narrative behind. No one followed her. My son looked at me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't smile. You wouldn't have heard me. You needed to see it yourself. He nodded slowly. What now? I touched the blanket in his arms. You start over. You hold him like you used to hold your dreams. And this time, Don't drop either of them. I turned to leave then, my legs suddenly aware of their age. But just as I stepped away, a voice behind me stopped me cold. I need to tell you something, the doctor said. I paused. She lowered her voice. There's more. That blanket. The one with your husband's name on it. I nodded. We did something extra. You asked for the paternity test. But we ran a secondary test too. My heart stopped. What kind of test? Her eyes flicked to the child. Mitochondrial. We traced maternal lineage too. It's all there. I frowned. Why? She hesitated. Because someone else had brought in results before. False ones. Forged. We had to confirm everything. I couldn't speak. My mouth felt dry. She leaned in. You were erased from the birth records. But we put your name back. And in that moment I understood. This wasn't just about proving he was my son's child. It was about proving he was mine too. Forever. Blood might lie. People might lie. But truth always finds a way back home. And now it had. The world didn't change overnight, but mine did. I didn't return to the house I had once called home. That place had long stopped feeling like one. After the brunch, I packed only what mattered: photo albums, a few clothes, and the baby blanket. The rest I left behind like old dust. I didn't call my son. I didn't wait for apologies. I simply moved to a quieter part of town, into a small flat above a bookstore where the mornings smelled like paper and cinnamon. The woman who owned the shop let me volunteer part-time. I dusted shelves and organized stories by theme: resilience, rebirth, truth. The ones no one believed until the very last page. The calls came at first. My son left voicemails. Tentative, raw. He wanted to talk, to explain, to make amends. But I had no use for explanations anymore. The truth had already spoken. Loudly. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't need more noise. And from Marlene, only silence. She vanished into her own mess, her voice now lost in legal paperwork and private gossip. Someone said she moved back with her parents. Others whispered she was contesting custody. But none of that reached me. It didn't need to. I had what mattered. I had peace. I had the child. Sometimes my grandson would visit with my son. We kept it simple. No talk of the past. Just books, bedtime stories, warm soup. He called me by name now, but sometimes when he was half asleep, he'd whisper the old one, my husband's name, as if he was still holding on to that thread of legacy passed to him in silence. I never corrected him. I just held him tighter. I never returned the bracelet. The one I'd left on their wedding bed, the one Marlene had gutted and rebuilt. It came back to me in a small package, unceremoniously. No note. Just the mangled remains. I held it once, then put it away. Not out of bitterness. Out of closure. Let it stay broken. Let it remind me that not everything needs to be repaired. Some things only need to be left behind. One afternoon, I walked by a consignment shop and spotted a familiar photo frame in the display window. It was from the brunch. A group shot, forced smiles, half-raised glasses. I was in the background, barely visible, out of focus. Cropped by accident or design, I couldn't tell. I stepped closer. And there it was again. That expression. The one I'd worn for decades. Quiet. Enduring. Empty but never absent. I didn't go in. I didn't ask for the photo. I simply stood for a moment, then walked away. The doctor called me too. Just once. She wanted to let me know they'd corrected the hospital record. My name was now listed under Authorized Guardian. A small change, she said. But I knew better. Names carry weight. They hold the truth when people forget. I thanked her. She said she only did what was right. I told her no, she did what was brave. At night, When the bookstore was locked and the street was quiet, I'd sit by the window and hold the baby blanket. Not to remember pain, but to remember love. The thread was wearing thin in places, but the name still shimmered faintly. I never tried to preserve it. Let it wear. Let it fade naturally. That was enough. He'd lived. He'd been remembered. He'd been passed on. I kept a box near my bed. Inside it were all the things they once said didn't matter. The hospital wristband. A small pair of baby socks. A printout of the paternity results. A photo of me holding my son for the first time. A letter I never sent, written after the wedding, addressed to him, full of words I'd buried deep. I never planned to give it to him. But I kept it. To remember who I was when I still believed I had to explain my worth. There was no final confrontation. No dramatic return to a dinner table. No applause. That's not how these stories end. They end with quiet mornings. With sunlight on a baby's face. With the sound of a door opening and a familiar voice saying, "We're here." My son brings him now. Every Saturday. No tension. No fanfare. Just a knock, a smile, a toddler holding a book upside down. I feed them both. I don't say much. I don't need to. Sometimes, that's how healing looks. Not like a revelation. Just like routine. Last week, as they were leaving, my grandson pointed to the bookshelf and asked, "Who reads the stories when you're alone?" I smiled and said, "I do. I always have." He didn't understand, but one day he will. One day he'll read my silence like scripture. I don't know if I'll ever be invited back into their family functions. Maybe I'll still be the shadow behind the curtain. But that's all right. Because the light I needed found me anyway. And the truth, the one they tried to bury with whispers and wine, now sleeps safely, wrapped in an old blanket, under my roof. I wasn't invited back. But I never needed to be.